Beha'alotcha, when you set up, God's trumpet called presence, encounter the living Messiah. The first anniversary of the deliverance. Chapter 9 of the book of Numbers begins with God's instructions to the people of Israel to observe Passover. This chapter deals with how the first Passover was celebrated in the wilderness. Adonai spoke to Moshe in the Sinai Desert in the first month of the second year, after they had left the land of Egypt. He said, "Let the people of Israel observe Pesach at its designated time. On the 14th day of this month, at dusk, you are to observe it at its designated time. You are to observe it according to all its regulations and rules." Numbers chapter 9, verse 2 and 3. The first anniversary of the deliverance. In the narrative of the Numbers chapter 9, there were certain people who had become unclean because of someone's corpse. So they could not observe Pesach on that day. So they came before Moshe and Aaron that day. Numbers chapter 9, verse 6. When it was time to celebrate the first anniversary of deliverance from Egypt, several men were impure due to a human corpse. This impurity prevented them from observing Passover with the rest of the congregation. Numbers chapter 9, verse 7. Purification from corpse contamination took 7 days, and they would not be able to complete the purification process in time to participate in the Passover. Anyone in a state of ritual impurity is forbidden from entering the sanctuary, handling the holy things, or eating the sacrifices according to the Torah. On the Passover of the Master's death, members of the priesthood refused to enter Pilate's palace because they would be rendered unclean and will not be able to eat the Passover that night. And on the Passover of the Master's death, 2 men found themselves ritually unclean by caring for the body of the Messiah, son of Joseph. Moshe took their complaint to God, and the Lord gave them the commandment of the second Passover, a month after the first Passover. The second Passover is in the second month, that is the month of Aliya, and occurs on the 14th day of the month of Aliya. We call this day Pesach Sheni. Those who could not offer a Passover sacrifice at the first Passover could do so a month later at the second Passover. The second Passover was not followed by a second festival of unleavened bread. Ritual impurity or absence from the temple prevented a person from observing 7 days of unleavened bread during the first month. Because of that, the second Passover included only the sacrifice of the lamb and the Seder meal that followed. The bones of Joseph. According to tradition, the men mentioned in Numbers chapter 9 became ritually impure because they were carrying the casket of Joseph. Israelites carried Joseph's bones with them from the time they left Egypt. On the Passover of Messiah's death, 2 men found themselves ritually unclean by caring for the body of Messiah, the son of Joseph. Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea were 2 secret disciples of the Master, men of prestige and influence. They both served on the Sanhedrin. These 2 secret disciples of Yeshua prepared the body of Yeshua for burial. By caring for the body of Yeshua, they became ceremonially unclean. As a result, they would have not been able to eat the Passover that evening. Instead of permitting servants to take care of Yeshua's burial, they forfeited their Passover Seder that evening. But by attending to his body personally, and would have celebrated the second Passover a month later in Jerusalem. It is possible that they were at a table together, and they lifted their cups in remembrance of the resurrected Messiah. At present, there is no temple or Passover sacrifice. Although we observe the festival of Passover, there is no slaughtering of a lamb or making a sacrifice. Therefore, commandment of the second Passover does not apply today. Even if a person is unclean or outside of Jerusalem, he may observe the first Passover Seder because there is no sacrifice involved. Some communities remember the second Passover by making a small Seder meal and eating unleavened bread. Messianic communities too hold the second Passover meal in memory of Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. No break a bone. The Torah commands that a person must not leave any of the Passover sacrifice lamb until morning, nor break a single bone of the lamb. Apostle John portrays Yeshua as a spiritual Passover sacrifice. It was preparation day, and the Judeans did not want the bodies to remain on the stake on Shabbat, since it was a specially important Shabbat. So they asked Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies removed. The soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man who had been put on a stake beside Yeshua. Then the legs of the other one. But when they got to Yeshua and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. However, one of the soldiers stabbed his side with a spear, and at once blood and water flowed out. The man who saw it has testified about it, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he tells the truth, so you too can trust. For these things happened in order to fulfill this passage of the Tanakh, John chapter 9 verse 31, because Yeshua died on a Friday, Passover Eve, and Eve of Shabbat. When a man hangs in crucifixion position, his diaphragm and lungs are unable to expel his breath. The crucified one had to hoist himself up with his legs in order to exhale and inhale. It is possible for the crucified one to live for several days by lifting themselves for breath, but when legs are broken, the crucified asphyxiated quickly. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But when they came to Yeshua and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. John chapter 19, verse 32 to 33. When the soldiers approached Yeshua, they found that Yeshua had already died and found it is unnecessary to break his legs. They removed him from the cross, and 2 of his disciples buried him immediately, which fulfilled the words, they are to leave none of it until morning, and they are not to break any of its bones. They are to observe it according to all the regulations of Pesach. Numbers chapter 9 verse 12. According to John, this was also a fulfillment of a passage from Psalms 34:19, which states, the righteous person suffers many evils, but Adonai rescues him out of them all. And John chapter 19 verse 36 states, for these things happened in order to fulfill this passage of the Tanakh. Not one of his bones will be broken. Aliya 4, Numbers chapter 9 verse 15 to chapter 10 verse 10. In this reading we find that the angel of the Lord accompanied the children of Israel throughout their journey in the wilderness in the form of a miraculous cloud of glory. This cloud overshadowed the camp. The tabernacle was a movable structure. The cloud lifted to indicate when the camp should break and move out. The cloud went ahead of the camp. When the cloud settled, they remained encamped, whether it was 2 days or a month or a year. Numbers chapter 9 verse 22. When the cloud lifted, children of Israel knew that it is an indication to break camp. Adonai said to Moshe, make 2 trumpets. Make them of hammered silver. Use them for summoning the community and for sounding the call to break camp and move on. Numbers chapter 10 verse 1 and 2. These trumpets were blown by the priests. They sounded different combinations of the trumpet blast. To assemble all the people, to assemble just the leaders, to signal which group of tribes should begin their journey, for a remembrance before God during war, for a remembrance before God on festival days.